Hey Nationers, today we're going to be taking an in-depth look into a massive organization, a sport that has taken the world by storm. That sport that I'm talking about is F1. We're going to be taking a look on how F1 exploded pretty much into the mainstream, how people basically got into F1 because it's a pretty lucrative, pretty luxurious business. So how did they explode? We're about to find out. If you guys do enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's get right into it.
Perhaps nothing better demonstrates the colossal scale of Formula One than the newest addition to its 5-continent calendar, the Las Vegas Grand Prix. Starting in 2023,
In Vegas, right?
F1
Which was,
going to
I'm
race
sure
down
was
one
well
of the
received.
most iconic roads in America, the Las Vegas Strip. But in order to facilitate that, they needed a paddock. The facility serving as temporary home to the 10 teams during race weekend. And specifically, they'd need a paddock close enough to the Strip, the street with some of the highest commercial land values in the entire world.
And foot traffic in the world.
It was no issue for Formula One management, who paid $240 million for this square plot, just 1,300 feet or 400 meters
Which I'm
long
assuming was
on
a parking
each
lot.
side. But that was just the start. Then they needed to actually build the paddock.
Right.
The fast-tracked construction of the facility reportedly cost upwards of $100 million.
Okay.
Then they had to build the racetrack. This was to be a street race, taking place on otherwise public roads, but the conventional pavement did not even come close to meeting the standards necessary for the world's fastest racing scene.
I hate to say it already. I feel like everything that I've heard is making this LA Grand Prix race a bad idea, which it was. It cost one single company an entire car. I hate to say it. I think everyone in America was right that this should have never happened.
Therefore, F1 spent 6 months and many millions more resurfacing the roads, much to the annoyance of Las Vegas locals who had to endure endless delays on the already congested streets. And construction ramped up even more around 2 months out as assembly of the grandstands, pedestrian bridges, and other temporary facilities began,
was not
requiring the relocation of trees, the draining of the Bellagio's iconic fountains, and plenty of other
just for a single fucking race. You gotta be kidding me. There's no way that they did all of that just so F1 can like rent a weekend. That is insane. The experience of Vegas is pretty iconic. It's pretty interesting in itself, especially the Bellagio, just other places. Like taking those walk bridges is iconic. But my God, for a rented weekend,
drastic changes.
This must have been a nightmare for anyone living in Las Vegas.
Formula One is reported to have spent upwards of $500 million developing its Vegas street circuit. So that's to say, they spent more than a small nation's GDP to build the facilities for one annual 90-minute race. To put that in perspective, just a few blocks to the south is the 4th most expensive stadium ever built in the entire world.
Shout out the Raiders,
it's called
baby.
Allegiant Stadium, and it cost about $2 billion.
Okay, but you're
its
constantly
primary
using
purpose
it?
is to host the Las Vegas Raiders,
Constantly using
the
it?
11th most valuable sports team in the world. The Raiders, of course, play in the NFL,
Devontae
the
Adams, let's
highest
go.
revenue sports league in the world. Allegiant Stadium also hosts college football and wrestling and concerts and more. But if you ignore all that and just focus on the Raiders, dividing $2 billion in construction costs by 8 annual regular season home games brings you to a construction cost of $250 million per annual event.
Okay,
so that means at minimum, F1 spent double as much in facility construction costs for its annual Las Vegas event. But of course, they don't just race in Vegas. A similar degree of disruption and devotion happens each year in Singapore, where the iconic streets of Marina Bay are shut down for its now legendary Grand Prix. And most iconically, the entire country of Monaco transforms into a racetrack each spring, leading up to its late May Grand Prix.
I feel like F1 just bullies these cities and we're like, yeah, we want to race here. We have a bunch of money, which I'm sure like most of these people who run these cities are like, oh, yeah, come on in, like $500 million. Like if you pay us, we would gladly have you here. I don't want to be like a Harper where I'm like, money kind of dictates everything, but I feel like every action that we've seen so far is an expensive amount of money for a short period of time to disrupt everyone's peace.
And on top of that, the series stops at a half dozen other street circuits, along with more than a dozen dedicated circuits dotted around the world each year. Each
just make a circuit outside the city. That's all that we ask.
500,000 fans across race weekend. Few motorsports events pull in crowds even close to those of F1's, meaning these circuits have large portions of their infrastructure, parking lots, grandstands, buildings, that only ever get used once a year for that 90-minute F1 race.
Yeah.
Despite this terrible inefficiency, plenty of these races actually turn a profit for the circuits and promoters. Not
Kinda crazy.
all, but enough that F1 now has far more venues vying to host a race than they can reasonably accommodate in an annual calendar. They've eliminated some less lucrative races and expanded the number of races each year, but still then, F1 is starting to schedule certain races only every 2 years to cope with demand and develop new markets.
Right.
But just 1 decade ago, such thunderous growth would have seemed unimaginable. Throughout the 2010s, F1 was in a state of decline. Its viewership figures were shrinking year after year, and by 2015, this summed to
F1 is where the money's
third of its
at. I don't
audience
know
gone
why.
in
I don't
just
know how.
7 years. Proposed races were failing to get funding, existing races were canceling out of unprofitability. From audience figures to revenue, F1 was just failing on all fronts. And while marketing was poor and digital strategy was bad and leadership was weak, the largest explanation for the state of F1 in the mid-2010s was remarkably simple. Formula One was, unequivocally and objectively, just plain boring. You see, much of their viewer experience is
Very
wrapped
fair.
up in the contribution of each race towards the season-long battle for drivers to score the most points and maintain the lead of the Drivers' Championship, the Grand Prize. In the 2015 season, reigning champion Lewis Hamilton won the very first race in Australia, meaning he started the season in first place of the Drivers' Championship. At the second race, in Malaysia, contender Sebastian Vettel won, but Hamilton's second place earned him enough points to stay in the lead of the Drivers' Championship. 2 weeks later in China, he won again, keeping him in the lead. In fact, throughout the 19 races of the 2015 season, Hamilton never left first place in the Drivers' Championship. From the audience's perspective, there was no struggle, no uncertainty, it was just pure dominance. Hamilton and his Mercedes teammate, Nico Rosberg, led a collective 82% of all laps, while the top 3 drivers combined led 97%.
So there's one thing like story-wise that I feel like they could have done is like, oh my goodness, can anyone beat them? Like Max Verstappen, who now has won a crap ton of championships, a clap ton. He's won a lot. That's all that I need to say about Max Verstappen. But then now this season, he hasn't won like every single one. And so there's a little bit of parity, which I kind of like. There's dominance and then there's parity. Then there's dominance and there's parity. So what's their plan after 2015 here?
By the end of the season, Mercedes had won all but 3 of the 19 races. Racing was rarely tight. The Mercedes cars often finished dozens of seconds ahead of first place. For a casual TV audience, it was just plain boring. And 2015 was hardly unique in its boringness. Over the past 20 seasons, the Drivers' Championship has only been fought all the way till the final race 8 times. In all other seasons, a driver has mathematically clinched it earlier, sometimes by as much as 6 races, and a mathematical clinch always happens long after the audience considers the championship a foregone conclusion. So that's to say, F1 has a particular propensity for this style of boring dominance. As an entertainment business, it's potentially its fatal flaw. But the explanation for why Formula One can be boring is right in the name. It's the fault of the formula. The word formula in this context is a reference to the set of rules and regulations that govern what teams are allowed to change in a car's design and what they aren't. Essentially, any motor racing series has some equivalent set of rules and regulations, but F1's is uniquely open-ended. It's supposed to be a battle of driver skill and engineering prowess. This is in comparison to something like NASCAR, where all teams are given the exact same car, are allowed to do little beyond setup changes, and the sport is intended to be fundamentally a battle of driver skill. Even in IndyCar,
Which I think I like.
F1's closest equivalent, teams are given limited freedom
When
to
they
modify
get out
the
of their
vehicles.
cars and they just start
While
fighting.
there certainly are other motorsport series that allow for open-ended development, with the exception of MotoGP, they don't tend to have large audiences because it often comes at the expense of entertainment. They often end up with scenarios where one car is just so dominant that driver skill can't make up for the difference. What's most exciting for a TV audience is to watch close racing won or lost by the drivers. The secretive development happening behind the scenes clearly does not translate into very exciting television. The sport attempts to mitigate the downsides of this system by dramatically revamping the rules every 5 or so years, which tends to shake up the hierarchy of performance as teams must find new technical solutions to achieve superlative performance. It was such a revamp that ended Mercedes' era of dominance in 2021, in fact. But sometimes these shakeups only perpetuate dominance, as wealthier teams are able to devote more of their budget to developing the new era of cars years in advance, whereas smaller teams must concentrate their spending on improving the car for the current season. So the solution to fixing F1's decline in the 2010s was never going to be to change what makes Formula One Formula One. But it's not like they had a whole lot of other good ideas either. For all that former CEO Bernie Ecclestone did for F1 over more than 50 years in the sport, after founding the Formula One group in 1987
like Jerry
and
Springer in
captaining it
his
as
old age?
CEO for 30 years, there is one interview that's come to define F1's position in the 2010s. One critical miss that's come to encapsulate the dying days of his leadership of the sport. Speaking with the Campaign Asia Pacific magazine, Ecclestone articulated that he saw no value in reaching out to a younger generation of fans or building out the brand's social media presence. Why invest in pushing content over Facebook and Twitter, his logic went, when young people won't have the money required to interact with the sport's sponsors like Rolex or UBS?
See, this is what I mean when I mean like lucrative, because like for myself, I have like an F1 shirt. But again, I think that still the market could still tap into more retail, not so high-end luxury like Rolex, like UBS, like other just high-end things. Social media has done wonders for F1 lately. Red Bull, obviously, Mercedes, just the personalities, people loving the drivers beyond just them being in the vehicle and driving their car. That's what I think he missed the mark on.
Sure, total viewership worldwide was plummeting year over year,
Right.
but there was no point
No
in
biggie.
trying to address that with viewers and fans with shallow pockets. So, a sport historically
called
defined by
everyone
a lack
broke.
of parity, whose most
On
interesting
social
aspects
media.
were shrouded in esoteric design details, seemed destined to remain on the fringes. Then, in late 2016, the sport entered a quiet revolution as Liberty Media, well-versed in sports television and sports media generally, agreed to purchase the floundering Formula One group for $4.4 billion. The vision was simple. Liberty Media had little intention of overhauling rules so core to the sport and so difficult to alter, but rather overhaul how the sport was consumed. As this pitch deck relayed, the opportunities were in promotion of F1 as a sport and brand, in
we
digital
need,
distribution,
right?
and in more strategically developed events. Essentially, in widening the sport out from its narrow core audience. But at the simplest level, the problem standing in the way of growing the audience, as they saw it, was that the race at the front of the pack was not always very interesting. Therefore, the solution was also simple. Make people care less about who was going to win the race. The transformation began at the Circuit of Catalunya in Barcelona, Spain, where preseason
It's very
testing was
important, by
taking
the way.
place in late February 2017. First, a letter circulated to the teams stating that existing social media restrictions on filming and sharing photos and videos from the paddock were being lifted. Then, this post. A video tweeted out by Red Bull following the daily routine of its
Shout
star
out
driver,
Oracle and
Daniel
Red Bull,
Ricciardo.
man.
What he eats for breakfast and with whom, how he stretches and prepares for the testing, and him getting in the race car itself. A day later came another behind-the-scenes video, but this time from the Mercedes team, showing, through time lapses, how the team gets a car ready through the night for the eventual champion Lewis Hamilton the following day. With the restrictions lifted, it was a race between teams
They're like,
to
"We've been
start
waiting
building
for
out their
this."
own content. And notably, in both Red Bull and Mercedes' efforts, neither the car nor the testing was the focus. Rather, it was the people who drove them and built them that took center stage. Fans, it turned out, wanted to know more about who was under the helmet, and F1 obliged. Soon came this video on the Mercedes YouTube page.
Come
one of
on
its
now.
earliest videos to break 1 million views, and while premised around doing what was never allowed before by touring the hospitality setup in Melbourne, the top comments have far less to say about the paddock and more on the character, charisma, and
People
confidence
love
of Lewis
people,
Hamilton.
man. People want to
Viewers
support
said they
people.
hadn't seen this side of him, and now they wanted more. Similarly empowered, Daniel Ricciardo, Hamilton's rival on the racetrack, saw his profile begin to grow as the sport, his Red Bull team, and he himself pushed his brand and offered an entrance into the daily life of
This kind of reminds me almost like NIL for NCAA, but for F1. Did F1 finally be like, you know what, you can actually use your name, image, and likeness? Like, did they have any restrictions on that? It seems like they might have had some. But again, people love people. This is why football, NBA, most sports have like a very big following. People want to root for Katie Ledecky. People want to root for Simone Biles. People want to root for Usain Bolt. These are people beyond just like their track stuff. Like Christian Coleman. He's a fantastic athlete, 100, 200 meter sprinter for the United States. I don't really care how he does. Like, yeah, I want him to do well, but like, I love the person that he is. So when he is performing, I love watching him. So I'm glad they made this change, man.
F1. From 2015 to 2017, the driver's Instagram profile took off, garnering hundreds of thousands of likes rather than the customary tens of thousands pulled in years prior. And while both drivers happened to be towards the front of the pack race in, race out, it wasn't only their success that garnered the increased attention. While Ricciardo's race results dipped from a high watermark in 2016 to losing a seat entirely in 2024, one can argue that he's never been as famous as he is now as an ever-available, equally fun-loving, and emotionally open athlete that the most casual F1 fan recognizes, and to an extent feels as though they understand. While that required only a simple change in policy, F1 quickly identified the opportunity of growing the off-track profiles of its drivers and started to play a more active role in it. This is a sampling of the official F1 Twitter page from January 19th, 2015. There are only 3 posts on that day, and all are using the app to push users to read old-school journalism content on F1's website. 2 years later, January 19th looked like this. More posts, 7 in total, a link to an article, some news reported right there on Twitter, a birthday wish to a driver, an old image, and a trend post. Now F1 wasn't just using Twitter to push to its website's content, it was using Twitter as a home for content itself. And most notably,
Isn't that
all the
ironic?
content was about on-track action. A lot was just about the drivers as people. By January 19th of 2025, this transformation was complete.
Isn't that so ironic that social media can be a cataclysmic platform for a company like F1? People love people. And it's so ironic because their old owner, the CEO, the guy that I said looked like Jerry Jones, or excuse me, Jerry Jones, probably is Jerry Jones-esque, but Jerry Springer in his late age, he was like, nah, Twitter, like, people aren't gonna like it. Come on now, man. Give us an opportunity. Give us people an opportunity to enjoy your sport.
Over 20
Glad
posts,
they did.
all of it content for the fan to consume without leaving the app. A similar investment is visible with F1's YouTube page, as videos published in the year prior to this all-important interview outlining a bold new future for the sport number just over 250, while those posted after this video until the beginning of the 2018 season cleanly double that count, numbering in the low 500s. The effect of these shifts, F1 hoped, was that people would care more about, say, watching Daniel Ricciardo make his way from 10th to 8th place, and therefore be able to focus less on Hamilton maintaining a 10-second lead in first place. But that required them to get them to watch in the first place, and then keep them watching. If the sport was now to emphasize the driver as much as the car, and the characters as much as their positions across the field, it needed to match the social media push to get under the helmets. So, more cameras. Not just on the race course, but within the paddock as well. And more live microphones too. By 2018, the broadcast began to include the communications between drivers and their teams, and then communications between team principals and the FIA and the race directors. Now, what the viewer could not see in a standard race, the strategic communication, the high-stakes, high-stress decision-making, and the occasional argument over rules, they could experience through the audio. This, along with increased focus on investing
Which is
more
my
on
favorite
your time
part
to
of
the
watching
midfield
F1.
rather than just the leaders, made a race more
Like seeing if somebody could
engaging for the
hold
less
pole position.
engineering-inclined
Like, I love
viewer.
that.
Other moves made the races easier for casual viewers, from revamping the broadcast theme music for the US audience to adding an ever-present leaderboard so anyone flipping channels could understand the race's status immediately. These strategies seemingly worked. In 2018, for the first time in a decade, F1's unique viewership rose. And most promisingly, they made the biggest headway in the one market that's always been F1's white whale. The one viewer base that, up until that point, remained uncharmed by Formula One, America.
Yeah.
So they doubled down on the strategy and turned the F1 grid into a format Americans were more used to, a reality TV show. It was called Drive to Survive. Debuting in 2018, this Netflix show gave audiences unprecedented
funny.
levels of access into
That's so
particularly
funny.
the drama and
America
personalities
loves
of the sport.
reality TV.
Viewers were immediately captivated by Daniel Ricciardo and team principal Gunter Steiner, and with an American audience that hit 1.2 million and a global audience that reached
Kinda
7
crazy.
million, almost a third of which were under 30, plenty were tuning into the series having never watched an actual race. F1
Come on
was
now.
going mainstream. The timing was impeccable, particularly for the US audience. F1's evolving digital strategy was already giving it momentum, but Drive to Survive launched just 1 year after F1 secured distribution rights in the States with ESPN. At the time, the sports network signed on for a steal,
Not
being granted the
ESPN,
rights
man.
to air F1 races for free. By 2020, the company was paying a meager $5 million per year. But in the following 2 years, the US audience outright doubled, and so ESPN's license fee soon exploded too to upwards of $75 million annually.
It's kind of crazy.
The Drive to Survive effect equaled big business for Formula One.
And
besides
games.
the licensing from ESPN, it increased viewers, followers, advertisers, and attendance. Now, the once Euro luxury car race that merely raised eyebrows in the States became one of the nation's most talked about events, with Formula One breaking records in Austin, Texas, by not only doubling its attendance from 263,000 in 2018 to...
I don't know what it is about like Americans in racing cars, because like NASCAR is huge here. IndyCar, anything car-wise that you're racing, Americans love. That's just the truth. It's just the truth.
444,000 in 2022, but by becoming the most highly attended iteration of the race in its history.
So many people.
And one of the most attended Grand Prix in the sport's history outright. Liberty Media didn't stop there, however. They tripled down on America and expanded host cities to include 2 of the United States' most iconic and campy locations, Miami and Las Vegas.
Miami makes sense.
Here, money
Las Vegas
is
makes sense, but
flamboyant,
my God.
and Formula One crowds flocked to the oceanside, palm tree-lined avenues of the Florida coast starting in 2022. Demand was high, with 242,000 people attending over 3 days, more than 2.6 million tuning in on TV, and secondary market tickets reaching $32,000. And then, in 2023, the company added that casino-lit asphalt of the Nevada desert, and some 315,000 people attended over the weekend. With the race starting at 11 p.m. to satisfy European time zones and capitalize on the lights of Sin City, cars careened down the infamous...
I know you probably aren't going to bed anytime soon in Vegas, but 11 p.m. and you're just hearing just these loud-ass cars revving down the strip. Honestly... Oh, I was going to say it would be a really nice time to be in a hotel, but they did black them out, which, rip.
Las Vegas Strip, and through that infamous Vegas lot that F1 had purchased for $240 million, demonstrating the company's enduring commitment to the city and the sport. F1 was firmly in the American zeitgeist, and globally it had entirely reversed its path of decline. Although, for all that Drive to Survive and the early 2020s did for F1, with time, the sport eventually, once again, crashed head-on into its fatal flaw. After a thrilling championship battle fought down to the last lap of the last race of 2021, 2022 saw a return to boring, predictable dominance.
Right.
Verstappen and Red Bull just couldn't stop winning.
Yeah.
In fact, 2023 was, statistically, the most dominant season in F1 history, with Verstappen breaking records for wins, podiums, points, laps led, percentage of wins, consecutive victories, and more. It's therefore no surprise that viewership has essentially stagnated since 2022, and the new American races started to struggle to sell out. Now is the true test for F1. They're faced with a challenge of continuing to capture the attention of that fresh young audience gathered 5 years ago, even as the sport continues its historical trend of bouncing between thrilling battles and mundane processions. But what will undoubtedly endure is F1's impact on the world of sports marketing. Almost every professional sports league has since commissioned a streaming show attempting to replicate the recipe of Drive to Survive. Look at any TikTok or Instagram page for a team, and there's a good shot it features the kinds of parasocial, personality-first strategies pioneered by F1. It turns out
pioneered by F1 is they might be right, they might not be right, but certainly you're not wrong in the when they say, yeah, Netflix has stuff for basketball, NBA, that's the same thing, football, NFL. So it's pioneered is not a bad term, I will say, at least in the digital space.
Characters don't need to win to captivate an audience. What F1 recognized before most was that through making an audience care about the people underneath the helmet, audiences will tune in, even just to watch their favorite person lose.
Nationers, I have a feeling this is a ad, which it is, but I hope you guys did enjoy learning a little bit about how F1 exploded from their CEO to digital media, social media, all of that. I hope you guys did enjoy a little bit of the F1 and the insight to the F1, which is kind of ironic because now there's insight to the F1 about how they gave insight to the people in F1. So all that to say, subscribe.